It's never too late to become a law firm owner with Neil Tyra. Episode 9. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the firm differentiator 10x effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another wonderful episode of Profit with Law. And today I have a great guest. His name is Neil Tyra. He's host of the Law Entrepreneur podcast. What I really love about Neil is that there's a lot of parallels between his journey and my journey. Neil became a lawyer as a career change in his 40s. And I really like that his values are to spend time, quality time with his family, to support his son in his athletics activities, to give back to the community, and all of this while running a really successful law practice. And he also has time to create a podcast, a weekly podcast show, as well as write a blog post, which admittedly he says he's not as consistent with. But at the end of the day, the question is, how are you spending your time? And how does Neil have time for all of this? So I think that listening to this episode will be very insightful to you, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Neil is a very personable guy, and although we've only fairly recently met, I feel like I've known him for a long time, and hopefully that comes through in our conversation that you'll be listening into. So without further ado, here is that interview. Neil, how are you?
I'm really well, Moshe. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I recently had the opportunity to be a guest on your show, The Law Entrepreneur. So I enjoyed that conversation, and I am anticipating with excitement being on the other side of this and being able to ask you some questions.
Well, it's really kind of interesting when you turn the tables, because I find it so easy to be on one side of the mic. When I'm on the other side, it's like, ooh, now what do I do?
Right. It's much easier on your side. You just answer the questions.
That's funny, though. I find it much easier on the other asking the question. So who knows?
All right. Well, the deal is that, and I didn't tell you this in the pre-show because you do it the same way. So there was no reason for me to even set the floor. So the listeners know how these interviews are being conducted. I'm not one of those people who likes to prep for the interview. So I'm here with nothing in hand, no notes and really no agenda. And that really brings the best quality to the interview, because I'm going to ask questions that people are probably going to have the same question, because I'm just responding to what's going on. So without further ado, let's jump right into it and just give a little background and history to the audience about who you are and how you came to practicing law and opening your practice and getting to the point where you are in your practice.
Well, sure. I like to tell the story. Law is my actual fourth degree, because I can't, or fourth career rather, because I can't really decide what I want to be when I grow up. I started off cooking for a living, and then I worked in the high-tech space for 20 plus years, building hardware and software systems for NASA and the DoD. And after I left that, I owned and operated a martial arts studio, quite a departure from what I was doing before that. And I ultimately sold the martial arts studio in order to go to law school late in life. So I was the oldest student at the Catholic University of America Law School, the Columbus School of Law. And I really thought that I was going to be a prosecutor, put bad guys in jail. I did all of my student teaching and all of my internships in the state's attorney's office here in the county in which I live. And then at the very last second, when I graduated and passed the bar, I had just a slight crisis of confidence. Like, did I commit to something too early, or what else was out there? And the interesting thing is, I found out there really wasn't much for a 50-year-old recent graduate. Age discrimination was a real thing, and I can't say that I really blame law firms, because if they're going to hire somebody and pay them a lot of money to be an associate, they want them to be around for a while. And I'm sure they looked at me and my age and thought, well, how long is he going to be here? But there was a firm in downtown Washington, D.C., a boutique firm that was doing personal injury work. And they liked the fact that I had been in the courtroom as a student lawyer and practicing intern with the state's attorney's office. So they took a chance on me, which I'm grateful for. Simeone and Miller, Tom Simeone and Craig Miller, both of whom have been guests on my own podcast. In fact, Tom was my very first guest back in episode 1. And I was grateful for the opportunity that they provided. And I worked with them for about 3 years or so. And then my son at that point was going into high school. He was a pretty big athlete at the time, had a chance to start for the soccer team the varsity team as a freshman, been really active in all of his games and his athletic career at that point. And I didn't want to have to ask somebody's permission to, take some time off to see his game. So I decided, with about this much forethought, I don't want to ask people to take time off. I'm quitting and starting my own firm. That was the entire thought process that went into it. So I told my bosses that that's what I wanted to do, and they were very supportive. And I opened up my own firm and started doing, again, personal injury, but I added family law to the mix as well, because there's no shortage of people who are wrecking their cars and wrecking their families. So it was a target-rich opportunity. And that was 15 years ago, and I've been at it ever since.
Wow. So if you don't mind my asking, how old were you when you went to law school?
I entered at 46 and graduated at 49.
Wow. So I don't know if you realize, you probably do. I think we might have covered this when you interviewed me, but our paths are very similar in
Yeah.
that I also have multiple careers. So I started in the IT industry as a basic computer assembly person back in the day when computers cost multiple thousands of dollars, and it made sense to buy the pieces and put it together and sell it. And ultimately made a career out of it, became a networking guru, and I had positions in sales and director of IT and stuff like that in that industry. Parallel to that, I had a passion for helping people. I was a lifeguard as a teenager, and I joined the local ambulance corps when I was 18 and became an EMT. And when I went through my divorce, just 6, 7 years later, I had gotten married really young. I went to paramedic school and became a paramedic, and I am still a paramedic today. I do it for the enjoyment, not for the money, although I get paid, but it's not a decent wage at all. And I do it once a week on every Thursday night. I ride for 12 hours overnight, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I still do that. And then during the course of that divorce, came up with this realization that IT was not my purpose. It wasn't lighting me up. I was really good at it. I was really, really good at it. But I didn't wake up excited every day to go to work. And I started looking for the next phase. And I ended up going to school for the first time. I never went to college out of high school. And I ended up going and getting my undergrad, then my MBA, and studying for the CPA exams and taking them and passing them. And similar to what happened with you, I tried to get a job at a public accounting firm and couldn't find somebody who was willing to hire me. And I don't want to call it age discrimination, because I was not anywhere close to the age you were at when you were looking for your job. I'm not even, okay, I'll give it away. I'm not even 40 yet. I'm turning 40 this year. So I was, a 30-something-year-old, but I was married, on my second marriage with, you know, now having babies, but already had three girls from my first marriage. So I came with, you know, as a family man looking for a job with, you know, with a work history behind me. And all the public accounting firms were looking for somebody brand new that they can mold and, you know, and give as much work as they want and command their schedule. And that just didn't work for me. So I was kind of forced into starting my own accounting practice, which then morphed into more of a consultancy and providing advisory services, which then morphed into coaching for law firms. And here we are today. So it's very interesting, the parallels that we have. And that's one of the reasons I think that I was attracted to your podcast and attracted to your personality.
Well, thanks. I think you know, we can't really tell the future. I wish that we could. And so it becomes really kind of adapting to what life hands you and making the most of it. I mean, you could have dwelled on the fact that the big accounting firms weren't hiring or didn't find you to be a suitable candidate. And I could have bemoaned the fact that nobody was going to hire an old fat white guy, but you know, you got to move on. And so I didn't see that as really age discrimination either. I saw it more as a business decision that law firms were making that, you know, in hindsight, I can completely understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm totally with you. Positivity and always moving forward has always been the name of the game for me. And I think that that's, you know, people who have that kind of mindset can be successful at anything that they do. And that's the way that I'm sure that you feel and I feel that no matter what profession I put myself into, I'm sure I'll be good at it. And, you know, it's really a matter of defining, you know, what am I going to bring to the world and how am I going to affect it and change it on my brief stay here?
For sure. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Now, I have a question for you, and
Sure.
this is completely off the cuff and nothing to do with anything. You mentioned something about roller derby. Are you a roller derby coach or something like that? And the reason I'm asking is because I have a tax client who is in Maryland and is a roller derby-er. I don't know if that's the right terminology. So, you know, I had caught that on one of your episodes, and I was just curious about that.
Exactly. I'm associated with the Free State Roller Derby League, which is located here in Montgomery County, Maryland. And like many things in my life, this experience started out in a bar, in an adult setting, and I saw a poster for the league that was looking for volunteers to help with their inaugural season. And I used to skate competitively as a kid. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty interesting. So they were having a introductory meeting, and I went to that. And the women who were associated with it were just delightful and really passionate about what they were trying to establish. And I didn't know at that time, I do now, that women's flat track roller derby is the fastest growing female participation sport in the world. And there are women's flat track roller derby leagues popping up all over the country, and in fact all over the world. They have international competition and World Cup style tournaments, and there's quite a bit of effort to try and get roller derby included as an Olympic sport at some point. So I started off working with Free State as initially a referee, and so I was on skates refereeing their inaugural bouts, but trying to do that as well at the same time as raising a family and running a law firm. The time demands got to be a little much, so I switched over, continue to support the league, and now I'm the house announcer. So I get to live out my Michael Buffer, Bruce Buffer dreams, and I, you know, announce their bouts. And for anybody who's listening, Free State has their inaugural home bout this Saturday, 4 o'clock at the Rockville Sportsplex. So
I'm not sure this episode will be live yet then, but
yeah,
we're recording on April 2nd. So,
yeah,
but this will probably be released in a couple of weeks. So it's really interesting. And What's even more interesting is that you are quite the eclectic individual with so many different skill sets and hobbies and passions and interests. And I think that some of the people who are listening to this are thinking, how are you the owner of a law firm and also able to do all these things? Like it seems like you've figured out how to create time that doesn't exist for other people. So is there some secret weapon, or is it that you're just not very busy in your practice?
Well, no, I wish that sometimes I wish that were the case, not being that busy in the practice. Um, I think, most people that I encounter who say, boy, I just haven't got the time to do all that stuff, are usually the folks that are spending a lot of time in front of the TV or doing other things that might not otherwise be productive. Now don't get me wrong, I spend plenty of time in front of the TV. That's when I try and multitask. So I try and do low level work on the law firm, when I'm watching the baseball game, for instance. But I think it's just a matter of committing to do something. The derby takes a few hours. um, I'm really working hard at learning to play guitar, so that's a few hours a day as well, and run the practice and play golf and travel with my wife. And yeah, it does get to be a little hectic at times. Technology helps a lot for me, so I try and leverage being an old techie. I try and leverage technology as much as I can in order to find more time on my schedule. Also, remembering that it's okay to say no sometimes increases opportunities and windows for you to devote yourself to other things. So, but yeah, it's I'm the kind of person also that if I'm not doing something for an hour, I start to get antsy. I'm like, I need to do something. Or if I'm not around other people or interacting with other people, I start to get kind of, frankly, to be honest with you, I get a little bummed out. Like, what's going on? Where are all my friends? I should be doing something. So I'm really social and active, and you'd think I'd be skinny as a rail, but that's one of the conundrums of life, I think.
Yeah, I have the same struggles with my physique as well. But I too, my number one core value is family. And one of the reasons why I decided to create my own business, very similar to you wanting to be able to spend time, at your son's games. I actually was employed at a company that gave me a lot of time freedom. I was in an upper level management position, and they really trusted me to get the job done. And I was able to attend all of those things. But I had a different vision, and my vision was, I've got two really little ones, and they're going to eventually be in elementary school very soon, and that day ends at 2:30 in the afternoon, and I wanted to be able to just close up shop and just spend the rest of the day with them. And and long term, I don't think an employer would have been too pleased with that arrangement. So that's part of my motivation of doing that. And I don't even know where I was going with that story. Um, but you had talked about how you have, people can make time for the things that are important to them. And I think that that's really what it boils down to, is that we all get the same 168 hours in the week, and we get to make a decision at every juncture, every minute, every second, how we're going to spend that time. And it's really priorities. Like, if you are prioritizing other things, you will make them a priority. You'll make it work. I very rarely work on the weekend. And, from Friday afternoon till Sunday night, I'm spending time with my wife and kids. And I mean, there are times that we're busy, and and I need to put in a couple hours here, a couple hours there, but I really try to guard that as sacred, because that's, at the end of the day, why are we doing this? Why are you running a practice? Why am I running a business? Why are we earning money? Now, obviously, there's other motives, like helping people and creating an impact in the world, but the effort of bringing in money is just to support the family. So why would we sacrifice our time with the family and our enjoyment with the family in order to bring that money in?
Yeah, and I think also is enormously helpful if you love what you're doing. I recognize that if our listeners, uh, for whatever reason, circumstances of life or whatever, if they're stuck in a job, in a career that they don't enjoy, it's going to make everything much more difficult. And it's easy and glib to say, well, find something that you love. But really, I think you really have to do that because, and it's one of the things I like about the practice of law, because there's so many facets in a law practice that if you're not happy with an area that you're doing, you can switch. So for instance, not that I was unhappy doing family law. I love family law. I love the challenges and the stories and the people involved for the most part. But as my kids got older and moved away, I wanted to have even more flexibility. So I wanted to decouple myself from the courthouse. And family law requires that you adhere to the court schedule for hearings and divorces and trials and the like. So I decided that I need to move away from that and find a practice of law that is a little more transactional, and preferably one that I could do from anywhere, not having to be, nearby the courthouse. So I wanted to be able to practice from the beach or, from the deck of a ocean liner, if that's what we chose to do. And that's why I gravitated towards estate planning, because with an estate planning practice, I can really kind of virtualize the whole experience and be in contact and provide service and value to my clients using the internet, using the phone, using video conferencing, FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, and the like. And today's technology, I can provide those services from anywhere, literally in the world. And so that's given me a lot of freedom so that I don't have to commute to the office. I don't have to commute to the various courthouses around the state. And so that is a force multiplier in terms of returning time back to me.
Right. And it sounds like the perfect solution to your problem. And this goes hand in hand with all of your decisions that you've made throughout your various career stages and steps, that you found the solution that worked for your situation. And I think that if our listeners are paying attention, you can see between the lines and recognize that at the end of the day, if you want to be happy, you want to be successful, you have to be an action taker. You have to be willing to take a step towards what you want in order to make that happen. It's not going to just come to you and fall into your lap. And I love that about the whole party, all the fabric of your story.
Well, also make no mistake about it. I made a ton of mistakes. I wasted an enormous amount of money with those mistakes. So it hasn't been all peaches and cream. And that's true, frankly, in several of my past experiences, including my martial arts studio. I felt like when I opened my own firm that I had learned from all the mistakes that I had made when I ran the karate school. But what I came to find out is that there's a whole slew of new mistakes to make, and I pretty much made all of them. And so you just have to be willing to learn from them. If you're not making a mistake, you're not trying, and you're not pushing yourself. And you just hope, and in this respect, I think to some degree I've been lucky, that I've been able to outlast my mistakes, and they haven't ruined me. So, and I've learned a great deal from them. So, and as a perfect example of that, you're in the coaching business. I had spent a lot of money on coaching, and with some varied results. And I got to a point where I just, I don't want to hire a coach anymore. I think I've done that for the time being. That's actually part of the motivation of why I started the podcast, The Law Entrepreneur. And that was, I figured that I could get free advice, frankly. And so I started the podcast, and I thought, if I get 3 months out of it, if I get 6 months out of it, I will have interviewed a lot of people to find out what they did right, what they did wrong in developing their practice. And I could apply that to my own and continue to grow from that perspective. Little did I know that there are lots of other folks in the same boat who loved hearing those stories. And we're now 4 years later, and I'm still doing a weekly podcast and still learning from my guests all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's amazing is that this goes back to our earlier conversation. This is just one more feather in that cap of what you make time for. Producing a podcast is not an easy feat, and doing it consistently. I mean, I can tell you this is my second podcast, and the first one I failed miserably at being consistent, and therefore it just didn't, it's still sitting there in the iTunes library with 7 episodes or 8 episodes and never went anywhere. I made it past the mark that most people do and then stopped there. So a lot of kudos to you for sticking with it and still keeping it going.
Again, it's just one of those things that you love to do. I mean, I treated it as, two people sitting down over a cup of coffee talking about work, or, over an adult beverage talking about their business, and hope that the questions that I was asking of my guests were the ones that the audience would want to know the answer to. If they were questions that I had, I would hope they had the same ones. And then I'm lucky enough that the audience does align with that. And I did feel a bit of an obligation. Sometimes it's a stretch to get guests lined up on a weekly basis, cut a couple of them close. But as of the last few months, I try and book ahead of time by 4 to 6 weeks so that I have a backlog of episodes that are ready to go. And that way it provides a lot more freedom and flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's okay with you, I want to switch gears in the conversation
Sure.
here and start to just ask you some questions specifically about how you run the practice, and
Sure.
maybe get unleash some jewels of insight from your vast experience, especially since you've practiced in basically 3 different practice areas, if I'm hearing correctly: first personal injury, then family law, and now estate planning.
Correct.
So, first of all, what is the size of your firm? Is it just you? Do you have anybody on staff?
I like to say that I have a 3-person firm, me, myself, and I. So I'm a true solo, although, excuse me, I've outsourced a lot of work. So if back in my old IT days, we used to have to count what we called FTEs, full-time employees or full-time employee equivalents. If you add up all the outsourced work that I contract for, then we're probably literally a 3-man firm. We probably have 3 full-time equivalents.
Okay, so let's dig into that, because there's a lot of people who are going to be listening to this show that are solos and looking to expand. And I think that there's a lot of alternatives to bringing on a full-time employee. And often a full-time employee is not the right first hire because
for sure,
they are limited to what they can do. And you can take that money and disperse it over a few outsourced services and get a lot more bang for your buck and be a lot more productive. So talk to us about what are some of the things that you're outsourcing, and how does that look for you as far as being able to juggle the workload between those different resources?
Well, the very first thing that I outsourced was receptionist duties. So I use a service, a firm called Ruby Receptionists, or Call Ruby. They're one of the more prolific and well-known virtual receptionist companies in the country, serving a lot of different businesses, but a great many attorneys use Call Ruby. And I was a client of theirs for a long time before they became a sponsor of my podcast. So I'm confident in saying that I can't say enough good things about quality of service that they provide. So I have a live receptionist that anybody who calls my office, they get the phone gets answered by a live receptionist, and they'll either put that call through to my cell phone wherever I may be in the world at the time, or they can put it through to a voicemail, or they'll take a message, or there's a variety of different ways that I can use that service. I know other attorneys who take advantage of Call Ruby, and they actually have them do a little bit of intake processing
Mm-hmm.
as well. So that's another level that you can go to with a company like Call Ruby. And I find them to be the best, but there are several other highly reputable virtual receptionist companies around. So you can shop around and find what works best for you. So that was the first resource that I used. Then as I was still doing some personal injury work, I used a company called Paralegal Associates.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was contracted paralegal hours. So I would sign them up, and then we would work on a case together, and they would do all of the paralegal activities on a personal injury case for me, such as getting from the client the list of medical providers that they treated with, uh, going to those medical providers, getting the bills and records from them, putting that whole package together, helping draft a demand package. So everything that you would have a paralegal or a very low level associate attorney in a typical firm, what you would have them do, I had paralegal associates or consultants do that for me. And so that allowed me to have a paralegal
Now,
on an as needed basis.
do you still use paralegal associates in your estate planning, or you don't have a need for that?
I don't have a need for that quite yet.
Okay.
Okay. So that was a second resource that I contracted out or outsourced.
I'm going to jump in for one
Sure.
moment here, Neil, and I just want to point out to the listeners that outsourcing to a paralegal company like that, it sounds like you need to have a very clearly defined process of what it is that you need done so that you can hand it off to them and have them do it. You're probably not getting the same paralegal every time that it's being done. And I want to point out that if you're thinking that and you're saying, "Oh, I don't have a process, so I'm not going to be able to do that." Well, guess what? If you hire an employee, you're going to have to do the same thing. You're going to have a process in place that they can follow. You're going to have a system in place that they can follow. And one of the things that I teach in my system for scaling a firm, it's the firm differentiator 10x system. One of the pillars is the system. It's having a system in place for every facet of your law firm. This is a really good opportunity to point out that if you want to outsource, whether it's to an external agency or whether it's to bring the resource in-house, you have to have a documented process, a system, something for them to follow to make sure that the work is being done the way that you expect to do it. Neil, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, and just along those lines, Moshe, I couldn't agree more. I learned a little trick from my old days back in the IT world that I worked on a project at one point where it was all the roles and tasks were new to our team, and we had to put together job descriptions and task procedures. And so everybody was responsible for generating their own job description and their own task procedure manual. And you were evaluated on the degree to which you participated in that process and the results of the output. So I've done the same in my law practice. So when I work with a paralegal, for instance, we go through the process of documenting what we're doing and how we're doing it so that I have the basis for that systematic approach that I can then refine and tailor as needed for subsequent interactions with outsourced resources. And just I keep building from there. So one way, you don't have to sit down and write your systems ahead of time or your procedures manual ahead of time. You can build it as you go along and refine it. It's more work on the front end, but on the back end, it simplifies things enormously.
Right. And I would even add that it seems like more work on the front end, but the reality is that
You have to do it anyway.
right, if you're doing it as you perform the process, then it's just documenting what you're doing. It doesn't really slow you down. It'll cost you a few more minutes. But what I use here in house at my organization, we use a tool called Loom. And I think it's useloom.us is the URL. We'll put that in the show notes, and you can find the URL there. But basically, it's a screen capture and audio recording program. So basically, it's a Chrome plugin. You click on it, and it'll it lets you share your desktop or share a specific tab in the browser. And basically, what I do is anything that I want to demonstrate to somebody how to do, I'll record a quick video. And then I use Asana, a project management application. I know you use another one, so I'll let you plug that in a minute and talk about how you use it. But I use Asana for the processes. So the process might have 17 steps, but then in each step that requires instruction, I'll link to that video that's automatically saved on Loom side. I don't have to manage a database of videos or anything like that. And I basically create a process that way. And it's very seamless. And just this past tax season, I brought on an employee to do data entry for the tax returns we were preparing. And I created a video. I just went through one or two clients, created videos as I did it, and that person was able to now take those videos and basically without any direction from me has been operating since the beginning of tax season. With I mean, there's some questions, but very few, and it's really amazing if you do this how much it frees you up. So it might feel like work on the front end, but the reality is that the amount that it frees you up, it's really not work at all.
And I would also argue that the process of doing that is a great audit of your own activities, and you find, nothing helps you learn a subject as much as having to teach it to somebody else. Learn that in the martial arts, and
Right.
nothing helps you understand the workings of your own business than trying to document how it in fact works. And when you start to do that, you can say, now that I think about that, is that the most efficient way to do this? And you can start and refine some opportunities for enhancement that you might not otherwise have stumbled upon had you not gone through that process.
Right. And I know, Neil, that you're a big techie and you like to find tools for everything. So what do you use to document your process and hand that over? Is that your process management application that you're using, or?
Well, we do a couple of things. So yes, I use a for lack of a better description, I use a customer relation management tool, CRM tool called Daylight. It's made by Market Circle out of Canada, and it's not law specific. So it's used by a lot of different people in a lot of different industries, but you can use it in a law practice. I certainly have and continue to do so. And one of the things that you can do within that CRM is you can set up a standardized activity set and also a pipeline approach. So the activity set would be a set of tasks that have discrete objectives and are spaced over the course of time in discrete time intervals, either um, specific days or weeks or relative to the previous event. You can set them up relationally, and so you can document the steps that have to take place using an activity set. And then over the course of time, if you want to look at a project which equates to a legal matter in our firm, it's projects under Daylight, think of it as a legal matter or case. You have a pipeline which shows from start to finish what are the things that happen in a typical case of that nature. And those would have different milestones, different intermediary objectives, and that gets laid out in a sequential pattern. So pipelines together with activity sets gives you an automated project description for each case that comes up within the law firm. And then very similar to what that you've talked about for specific steps along the way, we document how do you do that step. So how do you go about ordering the medical records if in the case of a personal injury matter, or how do you go about serving discovery in a family law event or case, or how do you go about collecting the initial data in an estate planning matter. Those different discrete steps are, I just simply use a word processing document with active links to videos where necessary for training purposes.
Okay, so you shared with us two services that you use, the virtual receptionist, and you've used the outsourced paralegal service. What other examples do you have of services that you outsource to that our listeners might use as a spark of an idea of what they might be able to do in their firm?
Well, there's a lot of things, a lot of tools in the kind of, lack of a better word, marketing arena that that I use that aren't necessarily outsourcing to a specific individual to do the work, but does allow me to do a great deal of work with a little bit of effort. As an example, I like to maintain a presence on social media
Mm-hmm.
in my Twitter account and Facebook page, and as well as keeping my website up to date. So I use a couple of different things to manage those platforms. I use Hootsuite, which allows me to write, one entry, one post, and have it appear on multiple platforms. So
Right.
instead of going to, first write a post on Facebook and then write a post on or tweet on Twitter and then write something on Instagram and then write on the website, you can do it all at one time. So that really saves a lot of time. And along those lines, I also then use a content management provider
Mm-hmm.
who assists me in that regard. So I use a company right now called Jurisdiction,
Okay.
and they are located here in Northern Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, they assist in that process of managing the website, blog posts on the website, newsletters, and social media content. So while I still write directly to all of those platforms, they also write on my behalf to them as well. So I've cut down, instead of spending, 8 hours a week doing that, I spend about an hour.
Gotcha.
And
So
I have twice as much content.
right, and I'm sure that the listeners of this show are asking a couple of questions right now. One
Sure.
of the questions that they're probably asking is, if I don't publish content, like, is there a value in that? What's the return on that? Like, where does that fit in the marketing efforts? That's one question that I'm sure that they are wondering. And the other question, if you put an email through your newsletter, is this going to past clients? Like, are you expecting return business from them, or is the hope that they're going to be referrals, or are these people who haven't used you but somehow made it into your world? So
Well, let
maybe
me
a
answer
little
the second.
insight. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
let me answer the second question first, and the answer is all the above.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, um, yes, I remarket to all my past clients because I found a lot of my former family law clients are now in need of estate planning services. So that's one. And yes, anybody who I come in contact with that I am able to get their email address, I send them a quick thank you and indicate that I'm going to add them to our email newsletter list. They can certainly opt out if they don't want it, but at least it lets them know that's my way of conveying additional value and additional information to them.
Mm-hmm.
And we try and make all of that non-salesy. It's really uh, educational material. It's not too dense, It's in bite-sized chunks, but it continues to educate the client or the potential client about what we offer, particularly in the estate planning arena now, because there's a lot of information that people just aren't aware of. And
Right.
it's a great opportunity to help teach and provide value that way. And look, if it's not something they're interested in, they simply opt out of it. There's no harm, no foul. So yes, it goes to everybody and anybody, more or less. And I segment that mailing list, in various ways. Um, and I use a tool. I use a tool called Aweber,
Mm-hmm.
along with Mailchimp. So I have two different email service providers,
Mm-hmm.
and in both of those systems, you're able to segment your list by using tags,
Right.
and then you can build a whole lot of logic around that in order to build email campaigns that are really tailored to the very specific needs of your audience. And whether it be to my podcast audience, which has one set of needs and interests and desires, versus my law firm audience, that's why I have two different email service providers.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there are different segments within each of those communities that I
Right.
like to address. So, yeah, I use all of that. Now, that was the second question. What was the first question? Was, is content marketing, does it have a return uh, on your
Right,
investment?
right, and to ask the question maybe a little bit differently is, what are you seeing as the primary source of clients coming into your firm? Is it these efforts that you're doing in on the content marketing side, or is it more referrals or some other source that's bringing the bulk of the business through the door?
I am a huge believer in the idea that there is no one system that stands alone. Now, I know people in law firms who say, "Now the only thing I do is referral based marketing," or I've known others that say, "All I do is content marketing." Still, a third say, "All I do is seminars. That's the only thing I do." I'm a believer that all of it has to work together. So content marketing, is an opportunity for you to educate your audience and allow them to get to know you and to hopefully like you and trust that you are capable of addressing their problems, when they arise. But in and of itself, are people going to hire you because you wrote this killer blog post that resonated with them? Not if you don't foster a relationship that they find beneficial. So I think those two things have to work hand in hand. You have to be able to develop a relationship. And if you can do so using content marketing as an aspect of that relationship building, I think you've synergistically combined those two processes. And I think you have to do both, along with, some other very standard, things. So, networking, getting out there and letting people know that who you are and what you do. Again, you can have the greatest content marketing in the world and you can be great at relationship building, but if you don't get out there, whether it be, electronically online or physically in person, if you don't make the effort to get out there, you're not going to, nobody's going to hear you. The tree fell in the forest and nobody heard it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you've described so eloquently how these different efforts work off of each other and feed off of each other. And it cannot be emphasized enough that no matter what you're doing, if you add another piece to the marketing engine, they all work off of each other. And even if it's if your primary thing is networking and you're primarily getting referrals, if you just add something to your website, add a video to your website, now people who are meeting you in the networking arena who are checking out your website might have a new impression, a better impression of you than they had before. And, if you're doing an email newsletter, then that is another way of keeping front and center in front of them. So now every time they see an email from you, they get reminded about the person that they met at that networking event. I like the way that you put it, and I like that it's working for you. There definitely are pluses and minuses to all of the efforts, and the one of the challenges we have as um, solo practices and small practices that are trying to grow is, where do you put your time, where do you put your money, where is that effort focused? And initially, networking and referrals make sense because it takes the least real commitment from you to go to these events. It doesn't really cost any money. However, it does take time. If you want to continue to foster relationships with people, you have to be on top of it. You have to reach out to them. But the biggest issue with that is, at some point, it may not be predictable enough. So if you're growing and adding staff members and you need to have predictability of new clients coming in, you may need to add other pieces to your system above and beyond referrals and networking.
Yeah, I'm going to push back just a little bit on that, Moshe. I'm going to say that I think if you're going to start someplace, it really should be content marketing. And the reason I say that is because I think you can force multiply that to a greater extent than you can, say, networking and relationship marketing. If I go to a networking event and I make a connection, I have to work that connection. I have to tend to it. I have to nurture it. I just can't write an email saying, "Hey, it was great meeting you. If you have any referrals, send them my way." That's not really relationship marketing. So it does take work. It does take effort, and you may not find a return on that activity, not necessarily that investment, but that activity right away. It's going to take time. Ultimately, if you continue to do that with consistency, I think your point is well made that it's going to be a low cost but a high value return. On the other hand, if you're doing content marketing, you're really writing, or and I would start with a blog post. Okay, you write a short blog post, 500, 800 words or so, on a topic that your potential client wants to and needs to answer. You then take that blog post, you can send it out via your email list, you can send it out via your newsletter, you can do a video. And this is really one of the, I used to say cutting edge, but now everybody's doing it. And really, if you're not doing it, you're way behind the curve. You create a video of reading essentially that same blog post. So you've got another way of getting that information out. You include that video in an email to your list, or you can add it to your web page, or you can add it to your Facebook business page. So in my opinion, I think that's the better effort. But I may be wrong.
Yeah, you know what, Neil? First of all, I don't think that there's any one right way or wrong
Well,
way.
that's exactly
And
true.
and I don't disagree with you. I am finding that the more and more small and solo and small law firms I'm running into, the bulk of them are getting the bulk of their business from referrals and networking. And I'm not saying that that's the right way to go. I'm just making an observation.
Yeah,
I'm
I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer of content marketing. I do it myself. I mean, we're on a podcast right
Right,
now,
there you go.
right? Where I am doing my own content marketing. And I teach actually a masterclass called the Law Firm Sales Machine, which I've been told I need to change into the Law Firm Client Getting Machine. But in that system that I teach on that masterclass, it's a combination of content marketing coupled with eyeballs through ads. But I'm right there with you that content marketing is very valuable and gives you the best opportunity to get to develop a relationship, because you can continue to provide content. Once somebody has hit something of yours, you have the ability to continue to put more of your stuff in front of them. And it takes, somewhere between 5 to 8 to 10 touch points for them to feel an affinity to you enough to become a client. And maybe in the area of law, it's even higher than that, because there's more apprehension and there's more, people are more concerned about, whether or not it's the right fit, as opposed to, choosing somebody to come clean their carpets. So, at the end of the day, I'm in agreement with you that content marketing is important. The biggest challenge that people have, and people are going to have listening to this, is the time question, and they're
Sure.
like, I don't have the time for it, and how do I do it? So I like that you're outsourcing, or you've partnered with somebody and you're outsourcing a lot of it. But the key is that you're still doing some of it.
Yep.
And the only way to get good at content marketing is to create more content.
Well, I had a friend, Marcus Sheridan, who appeared on my podcast way back when. Marcus Sheridan is an extremely well-known speaker and wrote a couple of books. Has a podcast. He's called the Sales Lion, and he's just top notch. His view is, in terms of content marketing, and specifically video content marketing these days, is just do it. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter how good it is. Just get out there and do it. Record it with your phone if need be, and just keep pumping it out there, because it's going to pay dividends. So that's one plug I thought I'd make. The other one, in proving that attorneys, our business is arguing both sides of the issue, literally sometimes.
Right.
I'm going to also refer you to another friend of mine, Stacy Brown Randall, who's been on my program. Delightful woman from North Carolina. Stacy's an author of a new book called Generating Business Referrals Without Asking. And you can go, just look her up on the internet, Stacy Brown Randall. You can buy the book anywhere that books can be purchased, and it's a great book for if you don't know how to set up a referral system. And one of the biggest problems with referrals is, how do you ask for that referral without making it sound like you're asking for a referral? You're not trying to con the other person, but the same token, if the first thing you do when you meet somebody is say, hey, can you send me any business? That's not fostering a relationship. That's not building a referral network. Stacy's got the system, or a system that's really, really, really good. So I commend anybody who might be interested in pursuing that to look her up. And no affiliation here, just a really smart woman who's got it together when it comes to referrals.
Yes, and I know Stacy as well, and I as well have her book. So I'm in agreement. Get the book, read it. It's actually a very easy read. It's a very short read, but it's great information. And honestly, it would be, I would almost say it would be criminal not to implement her strategy, because there's no excuse not to be getting referrals from your past clients.
Yeah.
And it's an often overlooked piece that law firm owners, for whatever reason, think that their past clients are past clients, and that they need to continue to constantly find new ones. And I'm a big believer in challenging that assumption, and from both perspectives. Is there something else that I can do for that past client and provide more service to them and make them a current client again? And the second thing is can I get that past client to actively refer me and bring me new business?
Yeah.
And so I think that Stacy's book would be a perfect read for that. And I like how you have brought two examples, both from your podcast, nonetheless, of people who, and I don't know that they're on opposing sides of the fence. I think that they would both agree that there's value to the others, efforts. And I like the just do it, the Nike symbol. That should be the mantra of any business owner, especially law firm owners. We get in our way so much as far as excuses of why we can't do something and why something's not going to work. And the reality is if you get out there and do it, you're going to get better at it. And even if you fail, you're going to fail forward. If you don't do it, you're going to fail by not doing it. You're not going to give yourself the opportunity to make a change, to do something. So, that's really the key message, I think, and the underlying, the fact that you brought up, was it Marcus Sheridan?
Yeah.
Marcus Sheridan's interview. So, Neil, it's been a pleasure, but we have gone on, and we could probably go for another hour if we wanted to. I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. I want to give you an opportunity to tell our listeners about your show, and if they want to get in touch with you, if there's any way you want to share for them to do that. And I really appreciate you coming and joining me here.
Well, thanks, Moshe. I do appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, so if anybody's interested in checking out the podcast, it's called The Law Entrepreneur. And as I said, it's mostly for attorneys who are starting or wanting to grow a solo or small firm practice. Although I will tell you that I have an oddly significant number of doctors, chiropractors, and dentists who listen to the show, because the tagline for our show is what they didn't teach us in law school about running a business. And as one chiropractor said to me, if you think they taught us how to run a chiropractic office in chiropractic school, I got a bridge to sell you. So it's not exclusively attorneys, although it's mostly attorneys. And if anybody wants to contact me more directly, you can email me at Neil@thelawentrepreneur.com. So that's Neil@thelawentrepreneur.com if you have a question along those lines, or feel free to contact me directly at the law office, and that would be Neil Tyra, all one word, at tyralawfirm.com. And I'm sure we'll include all of that in the show notes if you didn't catch it.
As we certainly will. And also, the Law Entrepreneur Podcast has a Facebook group that I am in, and if you want to become a member there and join the conversation of the Law Entrepreneurs Podcast, you can do so there as well. So
yeah, we have a special contest that we're getting ready to start, so that might be an opportune time to do that.
I got to check that out. All right, Neil, it's been so much fun, and I can't wait to see you personally at some time in the near future, which I'm sure we're going to meet up at some point. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you giving so much of your knowledge, your input, and your story to our audience. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you at some point in the future.
Thanks so very much, Moshe. I do appreciate it. Best of luck to you.
Thank you for tuning into the Profit with Law podcast. Your feedback is extremely valuable to us, as well as helping us reach more people with this valuable content. Please leave us a rating and review in your favorite podcast directory. Join us again next time when we are back with even more strategies to profit with law.